Hello, everybody. We are live today talking about a oh so important topic, something that can really end up grinding down our human nerves. And no matter how patient and positive we try to be, it just is hard. And that's the reality of it. I am joined today with Camille. Camille, thank you so much for joining us today to talk all about teenagers. Oh, they're so hard.
The crazy teenagers.
We have these beautiful little puppies and they're cute and they want to snuggle. And we spend so much time and we think, I finally mastered crate training and house training. And we think that everything's just going to be blissful. And we've moved through the hardest part of raising a dog.
Nope.
Not. So with our teenagers, that we're generally talking about a time frame between 6 months of age and 18 months of age. And a lot starts to change with our teenagers hormonally. A lot starts to change with them temperamentally. And of course, we're seeing a lot of new behaviors start to pop up during this time that can be really, really frustrating. So Camille, let's start off and talk about what some of the normal changes might look like. What might we expect to see as our dogs are entering into this teenage time?
Sure. So I think one of the hallmarks of teenagers, and when you can really start, my dog is now a teenager, is an increase in exploratory behavior. So a lot of times, young puppies tend to be very human focused because they depend on us for a lot of stuff. And so they tend to stay very close to us. They engage with us pretty easily. They tend to be more attentive and responsive because, we provide safety for them. And then teenage is the moment where they're like, whoop, nope, I don't need you anymore. This is way more interesting. I've got to discover the whole world.
Yeah.
And so they start being way more interested in the environment. They get more distracted. It's harder to get their attention, keep their attention, get them focused. So that's usually the big hallmark that you're entering the teenage phase. Is your dog just being more aware of their surroundings and more interested in the surroundings than they were before. Mm-hmm. I would say another thing that's also pretty typical of teenagers is excitability. So teenagers tend to get very excited very easily over nothing, literally like, ooh, leaf, and it's like, there's not, leaf flew by. It's not that exciting. Simply, yes, it was. That was the most exciting thing today ever. And so typically that's also a hallmark of teenagers is they tend to get, over-aroused and overexcited very easily. And because they still don't have very good self-control because they're still very much, puppies in their brain, they also tend to have very low frustration thresholds. So they get very excited and then they can't control the excitement and they get frustrated and blah. So a lot of times, those are things that a lot of people qualify as temper tantrums, that dog is barking and they're melting and are rolling on the floor and oh my god, so much drama. And it's really just the dog there's too much going on and it just can't contain it. It's just too much and it just boils over into big feelings.
Yeah. And I think I really like that point that you said about people calling it temper tantrums, because I think for people it's really easy for us, and I try really hard not to label our dogs, right? Because labeling often is not productive. Mm-hmm. And putting a label on it like this can sometimes give us a way to justify the behavior or even look past what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. And that inhibits us as trainers and as dog owners to help our dog through it, because they're not just having a temper tantrum. Yeah. There is something going on that is causing an undesirable behavior that we don't want to see. Sometimes it can be hard to figure out exactly what that is, but it's our job to look at, what do I see? What do I want to see? And then help our dogs get there. Yeah. Because labeling it a temper tantrum or just going, oh, he's young or he's stubborn, he'll get over it, is not the case, right? Yeah. We got to help our dogs through this, transitory period so that when we come out on the other side, yeah, we have that well-mannered dog that we really enjoy spending time with and can take places.
Yeah, because I would say, especially, when you just go, oh, well, temper tantrum, no big deal, just move over it, is at the very least, at the minimum, what you're doing is you're creating just an undesirable behavior pattern that this is normal and this is totally acceptable, and you can scream and, go, ah, when you're frustrated, and that's a valid response. which obviously is problematic once your dog is an adult and bigger and stronger, and they still resort to those types of behaviors to kind of get things they want because they've learned it's worked in the past. And at worst, we're ignoring real issues or real feelings. Our dog is trying to communicate that they're not comfortable, that they might be being fearful, or something is just not right. And by being, well, it's just a temper tantrum and moving over, we're not helping our dogs through it. And then usually that comes back full circle later on. So we want to make sure that, we really look at it and go, okay, are you over frustrated? Are you overexcited? Do you need to take a break from what we're doing? Or are you fearful? Or, kind of get to the base and help our dogs through it. And with teenagers, again, because they're excitable and they get very stimulated very easily, a lot of the time it is just a matter of, okay, this is too much for you. Let's take a step back and go back in the house, and let's limit exciting things for the time being, because you're in a phase where you just can't deal with all of the excitement, and you need to mature a little bit before we can go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and you to be able to think through it. But that's training plan. Right? Okay, this was too difficult. Let's take a step back. Let's work up to that level of distraction and stimulation. Without either just going whatever and forcing the dog to just power through it, which they never do, or altogether going, oh, you can't, no big deal, we'll never go to Lowe's ever again, and then that never gets resolved. And then again, full circle comes back at some point where, I guess we never resolved that.
Yeah. And I think, again, for pet people that are training their dogs, that concept of splitting can be really, really hard. And we think to ourselves, okay, I no longer have a puppy. I have a teenager that can now go places because they're fully vaccinated. And I want my dog to be able to do X, Y, and Z, right? Go to a busy park, go into Lowe's, sit with me at a restaurant. And we think, I just need to get my dog used to it. So they bring their dog into that environment, expecting to, get their dog used to that environment. But when we end up being bombarded with a dog who has a lot of emotions now and a dog who is easily excitable, we often see, pulling on the leash and jumping and barking and wanting to go visit everybody. And those environments can certainly be helpful, but a lot of the times they're a little bit too much for our teenagers to handle. And what we really need to do is think about that X, Y, and Z, think about where you want to be in the future, and then really split those concepts and the components of the environment up. So if we want to be able to take our dog out to a restaurant with us, think about all of those different pieces. It could be relaxation. It could be, laying on a mat when people are around. It could be the concept of food being around. And instead of trying to take our teenagers into that environment that's going to be way too overwhelming for them, we want to break that training process down and work on each of those little pieces, but in an environment where the dog can be successful. And that's really important. Instead of just throwing our dogs into that environment, going, how can I teach you these skills in a context that you understand so that I can pay you and reinforce you so that when you're ready and I've built this behavior up, you're then able to handle what I want you to handle in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest things for people too, is with teenagers, because physically your dog looks like an adult or close to being an adult. And so our mind goes, this is an adult, it looks like it, but we forget that the brain is still puppy. It is just still a baby brain in a big body. And so a lot of times we get ahead of ourselves, being, well, I have an adult, he can have, and like, no, you still have a tiny, teeny baby in the big body, and a lot of times in a big body that they don't know how to move well or navigate well, and it's messy. I mean, it's just like human teenagers, when we're 15, 16, and you still have the maturity of a 12-year-old, but your body looks like an adult, and it's awkward, and you don't know what to do, and it's just, and the feelings, you get overwhelmed, and it's like, but I can't do what I want. So, our dogs go through very similar stages, and they get themselves frustrated because they can't move the way they want to, and they're tripping over themselves, and they just, so again, you do want to build up those concepts where your dog can actually get the picture. So, this is what's paying me money, being on my mat and ignoring the food in my handler's hand. Okay, I get it. That's what gives me money. And then it's easier for them to apply that skill to different places, because it's a very clear skill they understand very well, versus we're at Starbucks and now don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And it's like, but there's too much going on. And then we set ourselves up for frustration because then our dog is not coping well. It's embarrassing because we have a crazy dog that's just being total goof. And it just sets us back. And it also sets up our dog for, seeing those events, going out to public places and being at Starbucks as conflicted, not that fun, because it's kind of my human yelled at me and I couldn't do any of the fun stuff I wanted. And so they don't look forward to it, and it's not pleasurable activity for them, which obviously goes against what we want, is to be able to enjoy those public places with our dogs and for them to enjoy being there with us,
Yeah. Yeah.
So do we have to? Do we really have to go to Starbucks today? Can we not do something else?
And for everyone watching, I see we've got some good questions coming in. Camille and I will take some time at the very end. So if you have questions while we're going through this, please feel free to drop those in the comments and we will address them. So another thing about training plans that got me thinking about when we were talking about settle on a mat is that generally with our teenagers, don't get me wrong, I love teaching fancy tricks, but most of the skills I'm focusing on with teenagers that are either client dogs or my own dogs are what I would, categorize as life skills.
Yeah.
And they're generally not super flashy behaviors, but they're the kind of behaviors that are going to make living with your dog easier. And that's really important, especially during this time, because our dogs are already going to be excitable and easily frustrated, which generally that triggers people to also be frustrated, right? When we're like, what are you doing? So some life skills that I like to teach with my teenagers, 4 on the floor is a really big one. Generally, our dogs are starting to get bigger. They're bouncing up onto counters. So I really like to, and with people, right? We have a dog that as a puppy, everybody was like, you're so cute, let me touch you. And now all of a sudden we're trying to get our dogs to ignore people and stay calm during greetings, which is really hard. Yeah. So I work a lot on just paying my dog for keeping all 4 feet on the ground. I also do a ton of settle on a mat, and I bring the mat around the house with me. So while I'm in my office on a Zoom call, my puppy gets cookies for hanging out on the bed. While I'm in the kitchen, my teenager gets cookies for hanging out on the bed. While we're eating dinner, they get cookies for hanging out on their bed, right? So that the dog starts to understand that when the human is stationary and relaxed, it's beneficial to also be stationary and relaxed. But this can be kind of challenging for our teenagers because our teenagers generally have an increased need in exercise and generally don't want to stay still. So that brings us into management. So what are some management techniques that you like to use for our teenagers when we're working on life skills?
Yeah, so teenagers are actually, it's the age frame where I use the most management. With very young puppies, you have to, because they'll pee everywhere and eat stuff they're not supposed to. So for safety purposes, they need to be contained, but they don't really need containment for much else. They just are blank little things that they don't really just do much at that point. But when I have my dogs, when they're usually going to the 6 months and up, I use a lot of management. That's when I usually use crates more, playpens more, tethering a lot more, just because, again, very low self-control. Remember, teenagers can't control themselves very well. They also tend to have very short attention spans, so they get bored easily. And so anything that involves duration is going to be very challenging. And so a lot of times I'll go to people's houses and like, my dog is 6 months old, we want to work on stay. I'm like, nope, we're not going to work on stay because it's just not going to go anywhere. Yeah. And everybody's going to get frustrated, and we're going to make stays a terrible, horrible chore. So duration. And so I always tell people, when you want to work on settle on a mat while we're eating food. Because obviously when I'm cooking and eating, I do not want my dog to jump on me, beg, and help themselves to food. So what I'll do is, when I'm prepping food, those 10 minutes where it's not very long, I'll practice go on your mat, pay my dog heavily for being on the mat as I prep food. And once I transition to actually eating, I know my dog will not be able to stay on their place for the hour it's going to take, or even the 30 minutes it's going to take for me to eat. It's just not possible. And I actually want to eat. So at that point, very good. I'm going to put you in your playpen or in your crate with a really high value chew so that they can still practice the desired response of when the human eats, the dog is away. Right? That's what we want them to learn. But we're helping them out by limiting the options and choices available to them so that they don't get frustrated and keep making the wrong choices. Yeah. That way they have, I'm making the right choice because that's the only choice I have. And then we can, yes, that's very good. And when your dog matures and then has the self-control to do duration, those things just come together because they've always practiced when the human eats, we're not involved. This is not something the dogs do with the humans. It's something we do separately. And I do the same thing when I have guests coming over with teenagers. So we'll practice initially saying hi politely. Go say hi. Very good. Okay. Go say hi. Okay, you've been out for 5 minutes. Now you're going to go into your crate with a yummy chew while the humans do something else. So that my dog also practices when people are visiting the house. It's not a party for me, woohoo, all the time.
Yeah.
It's really boring and we do something else. We just go and chill. And if I'm needed, the humans will call me back and we'll do stuff. So, making sure that we use those management tethers, crates, playpens, to really create nice pictures for our dogs of context. If the humans does X, I do B. And by limiting their options, it makes it really easy for them to choose the right option and not get frustrated in the process because it's too difficult. Again, it's really about difficulty. And if we give our dogs too many options, they just can't. They can't do it. It's just too much for them.
Yeah. Well, and I think that balance too of, I really liked what you said about management and training. So when the duration of the exercise is realistic, when I think my dog can hang out on the mat for this short amount of time, that's when we're maybe not using management at all and doing a lot of reinforcement, because that is what's going to train the dog to be able to do that for longer and longer periods. If I just avoid situations all the time and I say, my teenager's counter surfing and, trying to steal food, being bouncy, and I only put my dog in the X pen, well, that's great because you've at least prevented reinforcement of the naughty, right? And you're at least setting the dog up for success in the sense that they're not going to be jumping, you're not going to be trying to drag them down, there's not going to be that, pattern of behavior. But also remember, is that management going to be around forever? And if it is, that's okay. Like, I still use management. I've got 2 adult dogs in the house and I still use management with them. But there are certain things that we also want to think about long-term and getting rid of that management. So having the dog be successful with short repetitions of behavior and then setting them up for success on step 2, when we say, this is going to be too challenging for you, I'll remove you from the situation so that you're rehearsing the desired.
And that goes back to what you were saying too, of, training in context. So that's why, with leave it or even place, I never almost practice place with my puppy in a vacuum of, we're getting up, let's go practice place now. No, I'm about to prep food. This is the perfect time to practice place because that's the context I want my dog to go to place. Or I'm going to go hang out at the park. That's a great time to practice place because that's the skill I want my dog to be able to do at the park, is just to hang out, and watch things and not get excited.
Yeah.
So you want to be thoughtful because it's going to speed up your training if you do practice the behaviors you need when you actually need them. But again, initially, you'll have to do very short duration. Set your dog out for fun. Kind of create a little picture. See, when the food starts coming out, you go to a place, you get paid. Okay, now we're going to ask for too much duration, so I'm going to remove you and help you out with management, but that you're planting that seed of, this is the context, food comes out, the result is dog goes to their place. And so that when they're adults, naturally they'll do it on their own because that's what we've always done in this context. Because I think that's one of the things that most people get really frustrated about with teenagers is that they've practiced skills as puppies in a vacuum, right? We're going to take our puppy now and practice leave it. And the puppy is very good at leaving it once we're in that training session. And teenagers and a dog is like cleaning all the counters and the coffee tables. And it's like, but they have a good leave it cue. Yes, they do, but not in that context. And that's the big gap. That's where we find our dogs are, misbehaving, or they're being dominant or being defiant. And actually they're not. They just have not generalized the cue to that context. And so to them, they don't know what they should be doing. And they're doing what makes sense to them. We're scavengers. There's food out. Of course, I'm going to take it. That's what I'm supposed to do. So, that's why I always tell people this is a perfect time to really think about context and what you want your dog to do in that context, and training in the moment that you need it, not in a vacuum and then expecting your dog to make that leap. They're just not going to make it on their own.
And the other thing to think about too is that with a lot of our teenagers and working on life skills, I'm training on the go. I'm training little pieces throughout the day, reinforcing behavior I like, redirecting, reinforcing. So that means that I need to set myself up for success too, and make sure that I have treat jars around the house or treats in a pocket of a vest that I wear while I'm at home during the day. I'm putting treats on a hip belt. I'm
Yeah.
stuffing all of those puzzles beforehand because with our teenagers, generally everything is on the go, and that can seem exhausting unless we're prepared for it. But if
Yeah.
we set ourselves up with those treat jars, with our treats already packed in our hip belt, we make it easier for us to be consistent with that reinforcement. And that is really what is going to create the change that we want with our teenagers.
Yeah, for sure. And so same thing, having treats around the house and trying to capture or catch our dogs in the act doing the right thing is also going to be very useful, because that helps with, in this context, that's what we do, because I just paid you for offering that behavior. And also because, again, with teenagers who tend to be excitable and more interested in other stuff, and dogs in general being a non-verbal species and us being very verbal, that we tend to nag very easily, like, come here, come here, come here. Lay down, lay down, down. And that's really annoying. I mean, remember when you're teenagers and your parents like, did you empty the dishwasher? Did you empty the dishwasher? Oh my God. So the thing that happens to our dog is we keep cueing them to do stuff, which sometimes they can't do. And so they get, nag. And so they start seeing us as the naggy, not fun party police. And so their motivation to respond to us goes down. They're like, no.
Yeah.
And so then it sets us up for more failure down the road, because our dogs are getting less and less responsive to us because we're just noise in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So by catching your dog in the act or capturing, see, I didn't say anything. You did it, and I'm going to pay you. And your dog goes, hold on. Wait a minute. What if I do it again? Yeah, that's right. Oh, wait a minute. Are you always going to pay? Yes, that's right. Every time you go out of your place, if I don't ask you, you'll get paid. And you're creating really, really strong behavior without any friction or frustration involved.
Mm-hmm.
And you're setting up your dog for very long-term success, because then they'll naturally offer those behaviors, even in different contexts. They'll go, I'm not sure what to do, but this kind of looks like what we do at home. So I guess I'll just do what I usually do, which is go on my place and settle.
Yeah.
Which makes your life so much easier. Instead of, okay, remember, we have to go place and lay down and stay the whole time, right? So we want them to think for themselves and kind of get those, problem-solving skills of, maybe this is what I should do right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then remember too that the more you reinforce it, the more it's going to happen. So again, having those treats on you to pay your dogs when they are making the right choices. I find that generally particularly with our teenagers, we're like, oh my God, they're resting. Nobody say anything. Nobody touch the dog. Nobody bother the dog. Right. And then they're jumping on us, jumping on the couch, jumping on the counter, barking out the window. And we're like, hey, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop it. Right. And so when is the dog getting our attention? They're getting the attention during times when we don't want that behavior to happen. And they're getting no feedback at all when they're doing the right thing. So yes, we don't want to disturb and wake up the sleeping dog. But if I have a dog that finds their mat on their own, or a dog that finds a bone and starts chewing, right? Or comes up and sits at my feet instead of jumping, heck yes, I'm paying that.
Yeah.
I am capturing that and saying yes and paying a cookie so that I'm reinforcing those behaviors. And each time you do it, that behavior is going to get stronger and stronger, just like putting coins in a piggy bank until eventually you have, at the end of this teenage phase in adulthood, you've got this really nice dog that is easy to live with. And that's really, really important. So let's talk for just a moment about some of these behaviors that we can start to see during the teenage time that maybe are not quite as normal, or signs that we definitely need to reach out to a certified professional.
Yeah, so I would say, one of the things that tends to happen during teenagehood is also dogs tend to go through what usually are called secondary fear periods, which, sound worse than they are. They're really just times of sensitivity where dogs get sensitive about stuff, and a lot of it is linked to them being more exploratory, where they encounter new stuff and they're not sure how to deal with it, or, self-preservation kind of kicks in, because if they were in the wild, that's the time when they would venture away from the nest and from the safety of their siblings and parents. And so they would have to be very cautious about things. And so sometimes, you go through phases where your teenagers will seemingly be worried about random things or even things they've seen before that might seem out of place. Like garbage cans is a good example of teenagers suddenly will, wow, what is that? You've seen a million of them, but that one doesn't look right, or that one is too much in the street. So those, while they're normal, we want to make sure that we keep an eye and we want to see how long they last and how well our dogs recover. Because if our dogs does not recover and they kind of keep that fearful attitude, keeps going, then you're probably going to, getting close to social maturity and your dog is just getting more fearful. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a temporary phase. It's more like the genetics are kind of kicking in. This is also an age to teenagers transition away from being happy, bouncy puppies that want to play with everything and start having much more issues. They get more selective with dogs. They might not like every dog they see anymore. They might get very selective with some types of dogs we like, sometimes we don't like other dogs. They might also, because they're trying to see, how their behavior affects things around them. So they'll try new things. Sometimes it's funny because it's like, really, like you're going to scale the couch. It's like, well, I just want to see what happens. What's on the other side of the couch? I've never seen it before. But sometimes, especially in relation to other people and dogs or other living things, they can have serious repercussions. So, my example is teenagers who go to daycare or teenagers who frequently go to the dog park will start getting into scuffles and fights.
Yeah.
Because they're just trying, they're not actively setting out to start a fight. They're just kind of, what happens if I do that? And they just do it to the wrong dog. Mm-hmm. That is like, and because they've lost their puppy license, they're not a tiny, defenseless, cute puppy anymore. That other dogs will now put them back in their place, and so you're starting to create issues, around surrounding other dogs and other people because they're getting those kind of bad experiences over and over. So I would say those are times where I tend to be very cautious about interactions between my teenagers and other people and other dogs, especially if I don't know them, because I don't want to have any bad experience that might then, escalate into something more serious. Mm-hmm. And I would say this is also an age where typically dogs will become more reactive. But also something we're supporting our dogs and helping our dogs out, and that it's not keep going and keep creating those really bad behavior loops and then having, issues. A dog mature and they go, I don't know how to cope with this.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I'll be sure to link to that for everybody watching who is having some challenges with reactivity. Camille did a fantastic free presentation for everybody on reactive behavior and some basics on it. So we will be sure to post that so that if you guys are having more of that barky, lungy type behavior from your teenagers, you can take a look. And I think it's important to recognize that behavior doesn't just happen, if the dog is aggressive. That behavior starts to happen during teenage times if we are going through that fear period and starting to experience more stress. It's like, what is that? Get that away from me. Or it's that overexcited, life is wonderful teenager that as a puppy, we got to say hi to everybody. Every dog we saw, every person we saw, oh my gosh, how cute. And they would get to play. And now all of a sudden we're trying to walk our dogs and the dog's like, what the heck? Why can't I say hi to that person? So we can see that behavior happen on leash from frustration too, right? So I think one of the things that I really like to remind people with their teenagers is that we still have puppies on the brain, right? And sometimes, for example, your puppy, your teenager, he looks so grown up. Right. So it's easier to look at him and be like, you are an
adult.
Yeah. But some teenagers look really gangly. They're really still quite puppies. And so we look at them and think of them as puppies. But what's happening is we're letting inappropriate behavior happen longer than it should, setting them up to fail. For example, getting to greet everybody on walks, right? Once we're past that initial, like, I'm setting you up to get you social interactions through socialization, then I'm really working on, can you look away? Can you disengage? Can you ignore? And it's important to remember that no matter how little your teenager might be or how puppy they might look, they are on their way to adulthood. And we should make sure that we're not allowing behavior continue that we wouldn't want our adult doing, because the longer a behavior happens, the stronger it gets, and the more frustrated your dog is going to be when all of a sudden we say, nope,
Nope.
you're not allowed to do that anymore, right? That's really unfair to them, and we're going to have a lot of challenges trying to change that behavior at that point. So always think to yourself as you're entering these teenage times, is this something I'm okay with my adult dog doing? And if the answer is no, then we need to figure out a way so that that behavior doesn't happen. And a lot of times that means increasing distance quite a bit from all of these exciting or, stressful things that are around us.
Yes, and again, same thing, kind of paying, going back to splitting and making sure that we break it down into very easy, achievable steps. So distance is one thing, because obviously the further away you are, the less exciting it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, can you just say, oh, very good, let's walk away. I don't expect my teenager to heel past another dog. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Unless you use a lot of force and coercion to keep them there, which is not what we want to do, because as soon as you let go, you haven't trained your dog. You just held them back.
Yeah.
So very small, achievable steps of, did you see that dog 50 feet away? Very good. Let's go. That was very nice. You didn't get excited and crazy. Let's move on and do something else. And gradually working on getting closer or adding more duration. Can we now watch the dog from 50 feet for 10 seconds without getting big feelings and then walk away? Because again, you want to set your dog up for success and yourself for success. And if we ask too much too quickly, we're just creating those negative, behavior loops where I get excited, and then that gets reinforced because the interaction is so rewarding for teenagers too, that if they go and we go, oh, fine, just go say hi so that you stop.
Yeah.
You've just created very strong reinforcement for the because look, I had big feelings and now I get to play with my best friend in the world, and there's so much excitement that's created, and so you're just setting your dog to fail over and over and over again. So you want to be mindful of that and think long term. Even though they can't do long term skills right now, you do want to kind of think, okay, what are we working our way up to, and start kind of scaling back and, okay, let's start here now. Yeah. And not, well, we'll wait until, because then it's too late. And you can't go back in time and fix it.
No, you can't. And I think too that for a lot of our teenagers, this means that when we are doing our training sessions, we might have to be a little bit more mindful than we have been about really creating a good environment for them. So it doesn't mean we can't go out and do leash walk training, but it means that we're choosing quieter times of day, quieter locations where our dog won't be as triggered or as easily excited by, a bunch of dogs out. And it means that I am definitely, because I understand they have a short attention span, mixing things up. Yeah. I'm not going to a park, even if it's quiet, and expecting 20 minutes of duration on a mat. That's crazy, right? But I might do 5 minutes of settle and then a little sniffy walk, and then 10 minutes of settle and then a little sniffy walk, and then a little bit of leash work where I'm working on loose leash and keeping the dog close, and then we go, right? So then I'm, again, breaking it up so that it's a little bit of motion mixed in with the stillness, quiet part of the day, away from distractions, really being mindful about all of those components that are going to help my dog be successful in that training session. And with, successful repetitions over and over and over, eventually we don't have to be super far away from everybody at the park, right? Yeah. But we've spent time really building that foundation of all of the behavior we do want. So it's going to get easier and easier for our dog to do it. And our dog will be less overwhelmed by all of the stimuli that's around them.
Yeah, and that's what we do too. So, that we can do when we do group classes with the teenagers is usually that layering of skills. That, the first week we usually start with foundations of attention, and we build upon that. Same thing with leash walking. We work over it over several weeks, because I am not unrealistic to think the teenagers will learn to walk on a loose leash in 1 hour. No, it's okay. What are the foundation skills? What's involved in loose leash walking? attention, paying attention to what the handler is doing, being able to ignore distractions. So we want to have all of these pieces and then gradually bring them together and then gradually add duration. So you're layering things on top of each other. But if your foundation is shaky, like playing Jenga, the whole tower is going to fall over. So you want to make sure that you spend enough time working on those foundation skills, even though they might be boring and even though it's sometimes tedious because it feels like we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's like, come on, please, can we please move on? Nope. But because in the future, once again, your dog, naturally matures and they get the actual brain power to focus for more than half a second. Those things just come together. It's almost like a light switch. And I always tell that with teenagers, when do you know they're an adult? Literally one day, you're like, oh my God, you're an adult. I don't have to tell you these things. You actually are doing them without me telling you to.
Yeah.
Because you have laid that strong foundation. And so your dog knows exactly, what is expected, what gets step paid, what's working, what won't work. And then they have all of the skills and they all come together really, really well.
Yeah. Yeah, those foundations are important too. And if at any point, you're trying to do something like loose leash walking and you're like, my dog cannot pay attention when this distraction is around, it's totally okay and actually recommended to discontinue loose leash walking and just then focus on your attention, right? So if you notice that as you're moving along, gosh, I don't think my foundation was quite as strong as it needed to be, just stop. Stop what you're doing, go back to those foundations and build them up because that's what's going to suit you and your dog in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what I'm doing with my puppy, who's very social, and we're practicing, trail skills because we're hikers and we're going to go on trails very frequently. And now he's old enough that he can actually go for sustained walks without it being bad for his joints. But obviously, because he's just at the cusp, he just turned 6 months, so he's just on the cusp of entering, teenage phase. And he is very excited about dogs, very social, and he's also a German Shepherd from a vocal line, so he likes to make a lot of noise. So we're working on trail skills of being able to watch people without bouncing towards them to say hi, and watch other dogs without screaming at them to say hi to me. And he's a very good walker on leash. Naturally, he's always been a good walker. But guess what? When we pass other dogs, I'm not walking past other dogs. We move to the side. I have him sit and usually reward him for paying attention to me, calmly watching the dogs. The dogs walk by, take a big breath. Okay, let's walk again, because I am not expecting him to be able to multitask, to walk, maintain a loose leash, watch me, watch the dog, not get excited. It's just not going to happen. So set him up for success. Let's take a step. We might be too far away. Maybe you could be closer. Doesn't matter. We're working on foundation. I still want that really nice picture. When dogs and people approach, we step out of the way and watch them calmly, because once we are more mature and older on the trail, that concept, when people go by, we calm down, is what we want, right? We want that picture in our minds. When people passes, this is calm time, not excited time.
Yeah.
But so again, making sure we're splitting and helping our dogs make good choices.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good point that you brought up too about the exercise, is that generally during this time, our teenagers do have a higher requirement for exercise, but it's still very important to understand that those growth plates are not yet closed. So while we are increasing physical activity, we still need to make sure we're doing it safely. I'm not playing fetch with my teenagers. I'm not doing a bunch of sliding stops and jumping. We are doing, slow trail walks where they can get on a soft surface and maybe put in a little more distance. And then we're also getting creative with enrichment to help keep those brains busy, balancing both that physical and mental component without putting too much stress on that body that's, of course, still developing.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, they think my dog has a ton of energy, I just need to exercise it out. And that's not the right solution. That's not how we need to approach things. Exercise is not training. Exercise is not behavior modification. So we need to make sure that we're doing activities that are still safe for our dog developmentally. And then also balancing it with that reinforcement of calm behavior and brain games to kind of keep that brain occupied.
Yeah, and then going to that point too is be mindful with teenagers, because they have excitability and arousal issues. A lot of those physical exercise actually create a lot of excitement, a lot of arousal. So playing fetch with 20 minutes for teenagers not only is bad for their joints because they're sprinting and hard stops, hard turns, but also you're winding your dog up. So when you go back inside, they're going to take a nap for about 20 minutes because they're physically tired, but their brain is like, sugar high, and then they're like bouncing off the walls. So you're not actually creating a calmer, more relaxed dog. You're just creating a workout junkie because then they have to do more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
So you do want to use mental activities. So trail walks are great, walking across different terrain. So we went up the mountain yesterday and had to go up and smutty, so it was a short walk. It was about a mile, but he was physically and mentally tired because he had to think, where am I putting my feet in? I get to balance my body. Which was really, and then he slept the whole night. And today he's super mellow because he's still kind of, whoa, that was a big mental and physical workout.
Right.
That didn't tax his body and didn't create a lot of excitement. And plus, on top of it, it was a training opportunity because we got to practice good trail manners.
Yep.
So with teenagers, I usually tell people just because they have more energy than they can handle, try to do those type of activities where you're getting all three for one, right? We're doing some kind of physical activity. We're engaging our dog's brain. We're also practicing good life skills and manners so that you have then really nice, tired, relaxed dog.
Yeah.
But you're also, again, putting money in that piggy bank, right, of manners. So this is how we behave in those circumstances.
Yeah. So I want to dive in now to some of our questions from some of our community that is watching. And I'm going to actually start at the bottom here of this list because we have one that goes exactly to what we were just playing. Judy asks, what about playing with other dogs? We talked a little bit about this in regards to the dog park and big group play and how that can be overwhelming. Generally, with our teenagers, I find that smaller groups are better. We want to make sure that we're matching energy levels, matching size. I also am interrupting play quite a bit. So calling our dogs out of play, reinforcing calm behavior, and then letting them go back to it. Because what we generally see with our teenagers and our adolescents is that they have no control over that excitability and arousal. So as they play, I'm backwards here, as they play, excitement just keeps going up and up and up and up. And the higher that excitement gets, the more likely we are to see inappropriate play, the more likely we are to see behaviors like humping, sharp biting. So by interrupting that play, calling them away, and kind of keeping those sessions short, even if it's dogs that all get along really well, we're helping the dog learn kind of how to control that excitement, control that arousal so that group play stays very appropriate. And I also, with our teenagers, I'm remembering that up until this point, everybody has been a good friend. We've done a ton of play. We've done a ton of social time. So I really am making sure that I'm not just having dogs be the ultimate playmate.
Yeah.
Because then we get into that challenge where we have reactive dogs on leash because they see a dog and what does that dog mean? That dog means I get to go play.
Yeah.
So really making sure that play groups are appropriate and short, and even working on things like settle on a mat around other dogs, attention when other dogs are there, and then on walks, disengaging and walking away from dogs so that we're not just creating a dog that goes, oh my God, they're my best friend, right? And kind of loses it. We want to make sure we're working on disengaging and relaxation around other dogs as well.
Yeah, and then usually with teenagers too, I like to keep play groups with familiar dogs, so dogs that my puppy has seen several times, that they already have communication going, they kind of know each other, just because you're going through hormonal changes. And some dogs, adult dogs, random dogs that you do not know will not react to your dog, the teenage dog, the same way they would to a puppy, because puppies tend to be puppy license, so dogs will either avoid them completely because they don't want to deal with that, or they'll be very tolerant and take a lot of, noxious, like, make my face behavior. And then once the 6 month hit, it's like, no. And again, we do not want to have those negative experiences and scuffles when they're teenagers because those will last. Like this will scar your dog and they'll remember it. So I usually tend to stick with dogs that we already have, communication going. We're not figuring out. I know the dogs pretty well. I know how they're going to react. I don't have to worry about, especially because I have an intact male dog, that the dog is going to turn on him because he's just an intact male dog and the hormones are going through. Same thing if you have intact females, they can be very testy with other, intact females or neutered females. So you want to be aware of the dynamics and making sure, again, that your dog, when they play, are having good experiences. They're playing appropriately and they're rehearsing good play manners and play skills, and not free for all. Oh, you just drive me up the wall, let's go run with dogs so that you're tired.
Yeah.
Because that creates bad manners, that creates lots of arousal around other dogs, and most of the time we'll end up sometime down the road with a fight, and then it becomes a bigger problem than it needed to be.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I'm going to scroll through here and get some questions. I'm going to focus, for everybody watching, I'm going to focus on the ones that we have not already covered in the conversation, and that I think will be applicable to the general public.
Yeah, so I would say, building up on the dog plays. Typically with teenagers, I don't typically like to go to dog parks or have them in daycare, just because that tends to create that arousal around the dogs, and you see it when you go for walks. Your dog will get very excited whenever they see a dog because they see dog equals plaything. And at dog parks, you don't know most of the dogs there unless you go to quiet times with regulars that you see frequently, but you don't know the temperament of their dogs, so you don't know how they'll react to your dog. And at daycare, you're not there to actually see how play groups are managed, so there's too many variables for me to be comfortable. So typically, when my dog turns 6 months, 7 months, okay, we're going to scale back on those activities and do more calming stuff. And then you might go back once you've matured a little bit more, so that we're not creating, again, problems for ourselves right at that time.
So this one I think will hit home for a lot of people. Nikki says, with the lockdown and winter, we haven't been able to practice being outside around people. What are some things we can do now inside to prepare for spring? I think this is also very true just because we're living in a global pandemic. I think people are generally not going out as much as we used to, and it's changing how we're doing social time. What I would say is that you need to follow your own, local laws or ordinances about social distancing, whether or not you're allowed to be outside. Of course, mask up and be safe. But we need to do that now, because if we wait until the dog is an adult, until COVID passes, until whatever, it's going to be too late. And we're going to have to be working on a pretty intense behavior modification training plan. So inside, you could work on attention, relaxation, and hand targets. Those are all excellent skills that you could take out on the road with you. But I really would recommend doing what you can to get out, even if it's just for 5 minutes. So let's say you're driving to the grocery store and you're going to pick up, a click list order or Instacart or something like that. Bring the dog with you, put them in a crate, bring them along, and arrive 5 minutes early so that you could sit in the parking lot with them and reinforce, attention to you, stationary behavior, settle on a mat. And you can do those little field trips, a couple times a week whenever you're heading out, just to make sure that your dog isn't getting cabin fever and getting stuck inside, so that they're learning, even in small doses, how to deal with the outside world.
And another thing that you can do too when you're training inside, when you're doing those foundation behaviors, is to have in the background noises of crowds, people talking, cars, trucks, so that your dog, even though they can't have the visual stimuli of the outside world, they still get exposed to some of the sounds.
Yep.
And that's a good introductory of, see, you can focus when weird things are happening in the background, keep paying attention to me and good things will happen. And then my favorite is also, yes, I usually will throw puppies in the car and we'll drive around, even just to practice car manners of, when we're in the car, this is quiet, sleepy time, not go side to side, go crazy time.
Yeah.
And then we'll go in the parking lot and just, even if it's just to watch things from the car, and okay, that was good, let's go. We're going to go to Starbucks. Let's put a dog in the car and let's go through the drive-thru. That's a really nice experience of driving through a drive-thru and not getting excited that there's a person there reaching into the car. So that even though we don't have full access to the world and as much distraction as the world is, they're still kind of getting those. And again, you're creating little pictures for your dog, context. When we go in the car, this is how we behave, no matter what's happening. This is general car etiquette. When we go to a new place, this is how we behave. And so that they kind of get the picture. So once the world goes back to normal, it will look different, but they'll kind of go, huh, but it kind of reminds me of all the stuff we did And that's usually what we do. And so they're not just going, what is happening, and having to figure out what they're supposed to do on top of everything else.
Yeah. Yep. So we have a question here from Stephanie. How many cookies are too many cookies?
No such thing as too many cookies.
I agree. However, we certainly don't want to be I've seen a lot of teenagers that are pretty overweight because generally we're used to our puppies that had big growth spurts. So it's very easy to unintentionally overfeed the dog.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely want to make sure we're not doing that. But remember that as long as your dog likes their diet, I mean, when we say cookies, right? When I say I'm paying my dog for settle on a mat next to me, I'm just using their food. So whatever their normal food is, I'll take part of that allotment out. And they get a breakfast puzzle with half of that. And then the other half of that breakfast meal can be dished out, during the day as training opportunities. I'm reserving my highest value treats for the field trip stuff, all of the outdoor excursion type activities. So make sure that you're still paying your dog. We definitely want to make sure we're still paying that good behavior. And often I see that people are like, well, I've given him so much today. And that just means that we need to rethink how we're giving food to our dog, because theoretically, each piece of food that goes into them, they could be learning from.
Yeah.
Sarah says, our school suggested wearing costumes, carrying objects, etc., and feeding while doing the exercises. So this is definitely something you could do, just to change how we look while we're doing activities, because of course we want our dogs to generalize and really pick up on which clues or which contexts are important, right? So if I'm always wearing the same thing, my dog will get me wearing that thing, right? And it could make wearing sunglasses in the summer harder because the dog's like, I can't see your face. What's going on, right? Yeah. Or wearing masks, because I think that's going to be something our dogs are going to see for a long time moving forward. So practicing, even if you're not going out yet with your dog, make sure you're practicing at home with wearing that as well. We have a question here. This is a good one. Camille, I'll let you take this one. So Sai says, as a puppy, my dog met many of the neighbors and was reactive, but slowly started tolerating them. Now it's back to square one of barking and trying to lunge. Why is the training not sticking, and how do I fix or reverse some of the training?
So there might be a couple of things here. So my first kind of red flag, quote unquote, is that your young puppy was fearful. And that usually points to genetics, right? With very young dogs, if they show reactive behaviors or fearful behaviors, that's usually a temperament personality trait, not just situational thing that just, they got spooked in the moment. It's more of a, you have a shy, nervous dog. And so, becoming tolerant, it might just be that your dog may be habituated. It might have been that they just shut down a little bit. And so they go, well, I can't avoid it. So I'll just kind of sit there. And as they're becoming teenagers and kind of trying out new things, they feel like they have to be more assertive. And it's also an age, with teenagers where they'll start to see that, oh, hey, barking has an effect on things around me. Oh, lunging at things has an effect on that thing. Growling has an effect on things around me, and I can manipulate distance or make things happen or make things stop by barking, lunging, growling. And so as puppies, because they were so young and still defenseless and didn't have kind of that tool set, they never exploited it. But now that they're bigger and being more independent and fending for themselves, quote unquote, because, dogs obviously are not wild animals, but those behaviors come naturally, and they go, aha, if I bark at you, you just leave me alone. So I'm just going to do that because that works very well. So that might be what's happening. It might also be that your dog is just going through normal fear periods again, just period where, again, dogs get more sensitive about stuff, and it can be new things or it can be things they've seen before. It's not uncommon for dogs, teenagers to, when they're into a fear period, to be more sensitive about stuff that they were worried about before, right? So if you have a puppy that was spooked by a Christmas decoration, don't be surprised when, like, teenager at 8 months old, they see an inflatable thing and go, wow, what is that? Because they kind of remember back in their mind, I saw that before, and I did not like it. And they're sensitized to it now because hormones are happening and things are changing in their body. So I would say, keep that thing in mind. I would definitely want to consult with like a skilled, credentialed trainer to kind of help you see what exactly is going on and how much of it is situational fear period, gonna go away on its own-ish kind of thing, or a more, durable temperament trait.
Mm-hmm.
But in either case, I would recommend having expert guidance to help you and your dog's way so that we don't create, again, more negative experiences and make it worse from there.
Yep, absolutely. Here we've got a question from Megan. She has a large breed dog that is very excited when she greets people, not having an issue with jumping because they've done manding, but they're having trouble kind of keeping intensity low during greetings. So she's wondering if we have a good protocol that we use for teenagers to help them get better. This is a great question. And I would say that for me, it definitely depends on the context in which my teenager is greeting people. So are we talking about greetings in the home? Are we talking about greetings on a leash walk? I would say that if in general, my principle is that the dog stays relaxed and well behaved, and then they get to greet. So that looks different depending on if I'm on a walk or if I am in the home. In the home, I generally would do, settle on a mat or place or something like that to keep the dog stationary, give them a spot where they can get reinforced. I likely would need a little management to help keep them there instead of rushing up on my guest. And I would wait until the dog doesn't care about the people, right? Until they're like, oh, okay, the people are over here. And then I would instruct my guest to go say hi. And then if I'm on a leash walk, I'm working a lot on passing or attention to me, right? Moving off the trail and getting those eyeballs back to me. And when that gets easy, then I would allow that greeting of go say hi, right? And that greeting is something that I generally put on cue, and I teach it with a hand target. So we're teaching our dogs hand targets as a life skill to do a bunch of other things. So it's something that could be practiced in home with family members where the dog is not going to get overexcited.
Yeah.
So you work on putting that behavior on cue and then use that same cue when you're greeting other people.
Yeah, I would say one of the things I like to do too, specifically for greetings, because the issue is the excitement. Mm-hmm. And so even if you have a dog or puppy who understands 4 feet on the floor or manding, like sit for attention has been rewarding a lot. Again, you haven't practiced in that context, and the excitement factor, they haven't, generalized to 4 feet on the floor or sit when we're excited. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do usually is with my teenagers is to proof for that. So I'll use myself because I'm boring to my dog. They see me all the time, so I'm not that exciting. And I'll have my dog either sit or stand, and I'll just do a little bit of excitement, like, puppy! And if my dog maintains 4 feet on the floor or sit, yes, I pay them. Mm-hmm. And I'll gradually just add more and more excitement until I'm just like, puppy! And my dog just like, whatever. That helps them prove that we maintain, even when exciting things happen around us, if I keep all 4 feet on the floor, I get paid and I get the interaction I want, which then makes it easier when they actually see new people and get excited because they kind of have that practice of, ooh, I'm excited, but, or I know what I'm supposed to do instead of, bah, my brain stopped working 2 seconds ago. Can't do it anymore.
Whenever I do that with board and trains, my husband always comes down. He's like, what on earth are you doing? And I'm like,
I know.
On relaxation with excitement. He's like,
my neighbors just think I'm crazy because they just hear me going, all day long. It's like, well, we're working on stuff. I'm not insane.
Here's a great question from Linda. So, and this is pretty common. I'll preface that with this, that generally we can see our teenagers get a little mouthy during play. So we're having trouble teaching the dog not to bite. So one thing that I will say is that it's useless to say no bite. Oftentimes we try to tell our dogs not to do something. However, no is too vague. No doesn't mean anything to them. It can be used as an interrupter, but oftentimes when we people are saying it, we're frustrated, we're mad. And so it comes off with that frustration. So not only are we saying a word that means nothing to the dog, But then we're also coming at them with frustration, which with our teenagers, especially our confident ones, they can interpret that as play.
Mhm.
And so we'll often see those teenagers go, oh yeah, let me do it again, right? And they'll come back for more with greater intensity. So I love that you've disengaged from play when we get too mouthy. Generally, I am trying to select toys that are really long. Make it really easy, for example, in a game of tug, for the dog to get the toy and not you, right? The longer that toy, the easier it is for them to do that. I also am making sure that I'm not playing for too long, because the longer we play with our teenagers, like I said, the more that excitement level keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and then they can't control themselves anymore, and then there's an outburst, right? So keeping those sessions short. We have a YouTube video on our channel called Jazz Up, Settle Down, and I love playing that with teenagers. It's where we do a little bit of play and then drop, pay them for dropping, settle, pay them for settling, and then start again. And that's a really nice way to help our teenagers learn how to control that arousal and excitement during play, but still allow them that play outlet in a manner that also teaches them things.
And I would say with teenagers too is, kind of having scheduled nap times or quiet times, just because, again, this is an age where they have a lot of energy, more than they can actually handle. It's also an age where they're less likely to self-soothe and put themselves to sleep. Whereas with puppies, they'll kind of crash and burn. It's like, okay, can't do it anymore. Oof, and they just sleep for 2 hours. Teenagers typically don't have that mechanism anymore, so we tend to need to help them relax and take naps. And especially because remember that mouthy, nippy behavior tends to be a symptom of being overtired or overstimulated. So I would say if you find, especially towards the end of the day, or after a few days where the weather has been bad, you haven't been doing quite as much as and your dog is like being obnoxious and like very pushy, like hey, no, that's usually a sign that, okay, you're overstimulated, you need to actually rest, and that's a good time to give them some kind of like mental enrichment activity to work on. So, okay, here, you're spinning your wheels. Let me give you something that will occupy your brain and kind of make you think, but will slow you down. That's not going to create more arousal. And let me put you away so that you can then transition from there into a nice nap and actually rest and not, I'm not tired, I'm still awake, and then just not have that nice wind down where everybody just kind of settles. So I would say making sure you have quiet times during the day is also really important.
Yep. So I'm going to put this up there because I think that this will hit home with a lot of people. So we have often a lot of things that we're training for, through puppyhood, working on socialization. And then as they hit teenagers, we still are trying to teach all the things. And a lot of times that can be really overwhelming for us to organize our thoughts, organize our training plans. So there are certainly, different ways we could help ourselves be successful. I'm very visual, and I really like having like a list or something that I can make a physical checkbox with. So when I'm raising puppies or when I have board and trains, it's very like, these are the activities I want to practice in the morning, and then I can go do it and I can make a checkbox with it. And by thinking about it ahead of time, it also allows me to prioritize the things that are most important. And I think that is something that will be really helpful for you, Megan, and anyone else that's feeling overwhelmed, is take a step back from the things that are not most essential. If you're feeling overwhelmed and feel like you have too much on your plate, then we just need to streamline the activities that we're working on. And I totally understand that there's a lot to do, right? I mean, Camille and I are professional dog trainers. We have adult dogs, and we are always training our adult dogs new things and cleaning things up. But what I would say is that if we're feeling overwhelmed, at least for me, I'm often not very productive, right? Because I kind of, oh my gosh, there's so much, I just won't do anything, right? And
I can't fail if I don't do it.
Exactly. So I would say figure out a schedule that works for you. If you find that having a checklist is helpful, do that. Maybe putting something up on the fridge, reminding you the specific things that you're working on. And then I would say to just take a step back and streamline the activities that you're working on. Working more, again, teenager times, working more on life skills. having the treats on you so that you can train throughout the day. And then it's a little less daunting and, less of a huge time commitment.
Yeah. And I would say too, with puppies, that's why I love concept training, because I always, with puppies, work on concepts. So I don't teach actual cue, sit. We'll use, because that's a nice kind of behavior to have for lots of things. But typically I think about big concepts. So with my puppies, the big concepts are settle, right? So you need to be able to relax and just watch things happen around. So that's a big one that we do a lot. The second big one is attention. That being responsive to when your name is called, being able to redirect, touch my hand, come when called. Those are attention behaviors. If you can't get your dog's attention, they can't do any of these things. And then the third is the world, or socialization. So with puppies and teenagers, it's how to navigate the world and how we're supposed to behave in the world. I don't care about sit stays, durations, downstays. I do, because I do sports, and so I start working on those foundations, but those are fun.
Yeah.
My puppies, and even with boarders, big skills, you need to be able to be comfortable in a crate or playpen for a period of time without being frustrated and getting worked up, because you need to be able to settle down and know that you're not the center of the world. Sometimes the humans has to do other stuff that we can't take you with us, and you need to be comfortable with that. You need to be comfortable with the world and not getting worried about stuff, and how to behave when we're out of the house. And then again, with the attention, is that paying attention to your cues, and your handler gives you lots of money. So those are the big threes that I focus on. And then the specific skills, I add in as we keep going as games, but those are the big three that I always focus on, so that I don't feel like I have to do 5,000 different sit stay for 10 seconds, right, and then get overwhelmed. It's like, no, okay, we're working on three big concepts, and we'll add, again, layers to it as your dog gets older, and then it just falls into really nice behaviors for you, and you don't feel like you have to do 5,000 things today.
Yeah. Right now.
What do you mean your 4-month-old does not have a 25-second downstay? How dare you?
Yeah.
So those are extraneous. It's really just the matter is those concepts of, my puppy can hang out at the vet in the lobby for 5 minutes, and without it being like a complete, like having 5 toddlers on a sugar high running around, like, stop it. So those are more important than specific tiny little skills.
Yeah. So with our teenagers, I think another thing to remember is that it's okay, and in fact recommended, that you get help sooner than later. Camille, I know that you have some ways that you can offer some support. Will you talk to us a little bit about your in-person and virtual opportunities?
Sure. So we are doing, in March, we're starting our teenage class, which we have in person and online, and are pretty much mirrors of each other. We cover the same skills online as we do in person. And the class is very much geared towards teenagers, and we really address the typical teenager issues. So a lot of attention work, a lot of settle work, building those concepts for them, that being attentive and being calm is good, gets you lots of stuff when you do these things. We also work on typical, difficult skills or things that start to fall apart with teenagers. So loose leash walking, typically teenagers are terrible at. Recalls, also, usually they go, but I don't know, I've never heard this before, I've never done it. So those are the big 2 skills that we spend a lot of times working on. And we do also a lot of impulse control, so being able to be calm around food distractions, around people distractions, around dog distractions.
Yep.
So that, again, we can kind of help. Yes, there's excitement and stuff, but you can still think. You can use your brain and kind of build this nice foundation for adulthood, so that they're well-mannered, happy dogs that are easy to kind of take with you places and do stuff with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that a lot of people too, worry about online learning, but I will say we have links for both the in-person and online here in the description. It really is beneficial. And she's meeting with you once a week to go over all the material, to practice as a group. You can submit homework assignments for feedback to make sure you're doing things right. So it has both that self-serve and, trainer contact. And I think that's really important for our teenagers, because little mechanical changes about how we're training, how our environment is set up really do impact the dog a lot. And making small changes that, Camille would be able to see and help coach you through those will impact the dog's success, which will have them feeling less frustrated and you feeling less frustrated. So we have links to those in the description here. So if you'd like to sign up, please feel free to join us. All the other videos I mentioned, I will drop in the description for you as well. We have a nice chat on reactivity. We have a nice chat actually that Camille and I did specifically on impulse control. So I will post that in there as well. I know I also mentioned that Jazz Up Settle Down game, so I will post that for you guys as well. And for anybody who is just now tuning in, missed the beginning of it, this video will be available as a recording here, and then of course on our YouTube channel. So I will post a link for that as well. Camille, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully we helped ease some stress from some of our teenage owners, because I know with the pandemic, lots of people got puppies. And so lots of people have teenagers right now, and they are not the easiest age range to live in. In my opinion, they're the most challenging, but fortunately there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and, applying some of the concepts that we talked about today will definitely help. And if you need a little extra help, we've got those online classes for you that will really help reduce your stress level and get you and your dog moving in the right direction again.
For sure.
Camille, thank you again for joining, and I hope everybody has a great day.